Right. Let's do this. So I think it's too bright one setting higher on the lights. This is a little too dark, but I think we'll go with too dark rather than too light. I don't even have my charger. Okay, let's get started. So this is CSE 312, I hope I'm right. So the first thing we want to talk about is how to find the course website. And if you took 116 with me, you already know what's coming. I made this as simple as possible, CSE312.com. So CSE312.com, and this is where all the information for the course is going to be. Easy to remember, you just have to remember what course you're enrolled in, and you'll be able to find the course website at any point throughout the semester. I don't want anybody asking me where's the course website. If you ask that, I'll probably make fun of you or something. The only exception is if you added the course and weren't here for this lecture. Then I'll happily tell you what the course website is. But this is the course website. It's got everything you need to know. So let's go through this thing. Let's do this. The first thing is AutoLab. At this point, you're in a 300-level CC course. You've been exposed to AutoLab before. If you are a transfer student, though, this is where we submit our programming assignments. So when you're working on your homework for this course, you're going to roll that up into a zip file and then submit it on AutoLab. And AutoLab usually is for automated grading. It'll grade your assignment, spit out your score and your feedback. For this course, there's a lot of manual grading, but we're still going to use AutoLab for submissions. It keeps track of everything quite well. We're going to post your grades there, and even if it's fully manually graded, we're still going to post your grades there. Even if you're not submitting on AutoLab, we'll still post your grades there so you have all your grades in one spot. I think that's all I would need to say about AutoLab. I don't really need to talk about that much, right? YouTube, this is where the past lectures for the past 2 or 3 years, I forget how long I've been using YouTube, that's where all the past lectures are posted. If you want to check out what happened last semester, it's going to be very similar to what's going to happen this semester. So if you want to get ahead on the content, feel free to check those out. I'm on the fence whether this semester's videos will go to YouTube or not. I don't see the value of having multiple iterations of the same course on there. I don't know, but maybe. But you can still watch the past ones. This semester's videos, the room is recording right now, will be posted on Panopto still. I just don't think we'll transfer them to YouTube this semester. So you can still go to Panopto, check out those lectures, including this one. Hopefully I set it up properly, and it's recording right now. There are 2 sections of 312 for the first time this semester, and I'll reference that a few times. There are a few changes that we have to make because of that. There are 2 sections. So when you go to Panopto through UB Learns/Brightspace, when you go to the lecture recordings, you are going to see 2 recordings for each lecture day. So don't get confused by that. Don't think you missed anything or whatever. That's just the other lecture. If you want to watch the other lecture, knock yourself out. That's why I combine them and have them both on there in case you want to watch the other one. Maybe one of the recordings messed up one day, which happens from time to time. Usually when the mic pack, the battery goes dead, and I don't notice. In time, we lose some audio. Just watch the other one from the other thing. I'll be covering the same stuff on the same day in both sections. Piazza, I assume you're fairly familiar with Piazza as well. This is where you can ask questions from the course staff, make a private post to instructors if you have to talk about something specific to your submission or your assignment or your grades or anything that the entire class can't know about without violating some laws or AI policies. And also this link, I'm not going to click it because it's really bright and I blinded people in the last lecture. But this will take you right to the office hour schedule as well. It'll take you to the Piazza post that has the office hour schedule. And myself and the TAs will update that schedule as we go. It's very bare right now. I think Shad's the only one who put his office hours up so far. But that'll be populated in the upcoming weeks as all of our schedules settle down and me and the TAs can know exactly when our office hours are going to be. I'm pretty sure I know where mine are going to be. I think Tuesdays at noon-ish, noon or 11. But I'm not going to add them on until I know for sure. So this will take you to the office hour schedule. That schedule is dynamic, so before you make a trip to office hours, please check the schedule. Make sure you're not wasting a trip. If the TAs have to cancel or rearrange their schedule, I ask them to cross out their names or remove it from the schedule entirely. So make sure you check before you make a trip to see if that TA is actually going to be there. Save yourself a trip just in case they're not. And finally, Discord. There's just did this twice. You'd think I wouldn't lose my place at all. But Discord, it's a place where you can talk to other students. You know what Discord is. But feel free to join the Discord. I've been using the same Discord since COVID, so since 2020. And since I've been using it that long, there are a lot of students there, a lot of alumni, a lot of current and former TAs as well. A lot of wealth of information that you can draw upon. So if you want to ask questions and get advice from alumni, people who have been in your shoes now and now are currently in industry, you want to ask them how the job market is, which is kind of crappy right now. If you want to ask them how the interview process works and how hiring works and get some advice on that, or whatever, or just ask them what games they're playing. I don't care. Feel free to go in that Discord and ask them. There are a lot of people in there with a lot of information. I would be happy, or more than happy to share it with anyone who asks. So check that out. I have to give a disclaimer, because I almost got in trouble one semester. When you interact with TAs, because there will be current TAs in the Discord, when you interact with them, they are just themselves when they're in Discord. They're not acting as TAs. They're not getting paid to be on Discord, so they're not in their official roles in Discord. So don't be surprised if they act less than professional or less than you'd like them to act on Discord, because they're just a fellow student when you're there on Discord. There's no student-TA relationship there. They're just another student, and they're going to be themselves. So one of the implications of this is don't ask them programming questions. Especially don't DM the TAs or myself programming questions, or can you look at my grade on homework 3 or any of that stuff, anything related to the course. Just don't do it. Feel free to ask those questions in the general CC 312 channel and just ask everybody, blast it out there, and then start a discussion. You can talk with your classmates, and sometimes the TAs will still answer those questions, but as themselves, not on the clock. If you do want to ask us something specific about your grade, your homework, anything about the course, just head over to Piazza. Make a post to instructors. That's what Piazza's for. Discord is meant to be a more casual environment. The one official thing that I'll use Discord for is during lecture, I'll always have my phone open on the lecture channel in Discord. So I'll watch the lecture channel. If you have any questions during lecture or comments, you want to say something, you can always throw up your hand and just ask. That works the old-fashioned way. There's nothing really wrong with that protocol. But if you don't want to do that, for whatever reason, I don't care what the reason is, chat in the lecture channel on Discord, ask questions, tell me if I'm messing something up, if I'm on the wrong slide, or the slides on the website aren't up to date, or whatever it is. Whatever you need to say to get my attention, or if you just want to add something to lecture. Hey, this is really neat. It's related to this cool article I read. Isn't that neat? I don't care. Whatever you want. The one kind of exception to that is if things get too crazy in the lecture channel, which some sections do. Every section uses the lecture channel differently. Some barely use it at all. Some use it a lot. If it starts getting too crazy in there and it's just flooded with a whole bunch of stuff, since I'm watching it in lecture, it can be distracting, I guess, which is fine. That's why it's there. But if it's too distracting, because I got 100 things in my mind of all the topics that I got to cover, all the points that I need to make and everything, so if it gets too much, I just need to cut something out of my brain capacity, so I'll start ignoring that, and then I might miss a legitimate question. So if it gets too crazy, there's also a lecture off-topic channel. So if it's not related to what's going on in lecture, just take it over to off-topic, and you can talk with your classmates about whatever the hell you want over there. I don't care. You can talk about how bad I am at this, or how much you don't like me. I don't care. I don't care what you talk about over there. But if it's in the lecture channel, try to keep it related to what I'm talking about. At least, it can be a little tangential. I don't care. But yeah. All right. Any questions so far before we get into course stuff? Ooh. All right. So what is this course? I usually like to describe what this course is by talking about what it isn't. And this isn't a front-end course, and I always forget to define these, so I'm going to do it right now. If you're brand new to any web stuff and you just stumbled upon this course because you want to learn about web stuff, which, by the way, you came to the right place, then I got a few definitions for you: front-end and back-end web development. A web app is split into these two parts, front-end and back-end. The front-end is everything you see in the browser. That's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which I'd assume every one of you, at least at some point in your life, has ran into that. I think even in high school, it's hard to get through there without having at least one class that has one assignment on build a personal web page or something, right? Maybe I'm off base with that. I don't know. And I think in 199, you still do that. So you've probably been exposed to that at least a few times in your lives. And then there's backend. Backend is everything that happens at the server. So everything that your browser is communicating to the server, whatever that server is doing, that's the backend. This course is not front end. We hardly do any browser stuff. We hardly do any HTML, CSS, JavaScript. We don't do any front end frameworks. We don't do React or any of that. We don't talk about UX and UI, usability features, accessibility features. We don't talk about any of that. I shouldn't say any. There's a few points in a few lectures where I just kind of mention it because it's related to what we're talking about. But that's not what we do. That's not what you'll do on most programming assignments. You'll do very little, I shouldn't say none, you'll do very little front-end work in this course. This course is focused on the back end and protocols. So we like to go deep down into the details of protocols. The first one we're going to see is HTTP, which we'll use throughout the entire semester. And we're going to get into all of the little nitty-gritty details of how the protocol works, and you're going to implement that protocol on your assignments. So we're going to go low level. We're going to effectively start at the byte level and eventually find our way down at the bit level. We're going to do bit manipulation to be able to add extra features to our web apps that we're going to build. So it's heavily focused on back-end, low-level programming details, and protocols, implementing protocols, and reading documentation about protocols. If that's not your jam, it's still add drop. You can just get out of here and say, I don't want that. That's not my thing. I just wanted to muck around with lists and tables and stuff. If that's what you want to do, I shouldn't demean it like that. I wanted to work with UX because I'm about to mention 370. That's not what 370 is. If you want to mess around with front-end design and figure out how people use web apps, like how human beings actually interact with your web application, and how to make that user experience better, how to make things prettier, how to make websites look good and all that stuff, all the front-end stuff that runs in the browser, CSE 370 is your course. That's all about that. These two courses are two sides of the same coin. We're doing back-end in this class because that's the stuff I like. That's why I like teaching this one. And then Alan will teach us 370. He teaches all the front-end stuff, and he'll give, I'm sure, a similar speech to this where he's like, we ain't touching no back-end stuff. That stuff sucks. We don't care about protocols. We're just going to build things, actually build the software that does the things using all kinds of frameworks and stuff, React specifically. So if you're not interested in back-end stuff, no hard feelings, just drop the class. You don't want to suffer through this course if you're not actually interested in that stuff. And if you're interested in front-end stuff, go register for 370. Or what I recommend is if you are interested in web development as a career, take both of them. Absolutely take both of these courses. even if you plan on doing one or the other, front end or back end in your career, one of them excites you more, take both courses so you at least have a one course understanding of what the other side is doing. And I also like to recommend Modern Networking Concepts, which is all the networking stuff that combines the two, the front end and back end. How does information travel through the internet? So that's what the course is. And more importantly, what it's not front end stuff. I have no lecture where I go through a whole bunch of HTML element types and CSS properties and things like that. I do not have a lecture like that. I have one lecture on everything front end, which covers HTML, CSS, and JavaScript very quickly, and then we move on. So that's what the course is and isn't. And I do have expectations of you. I assume you want to learn about web applications. It seems silly to me, like silly that I even have to add this, but I do often get students every semester who find their way in this class who just don't care about web apps. And I always think the same thing, like, why are you here? Why did you register for this course? Well, I needed a software systems elective. There are lots of software systems electives. It's the biggest category of the depth requirements that you can fill. We have so many courses in software systems. But anyway, I assume you want to be here, want to learn about web applications, and I'm going to treat you as such. Like, we're going to learn about a whole bunch of cool stuff related to the web. Oh, I forgot to say the other side of that. If you are interested in low-level details and the nitty-gritty details of these protocols and that low-level programming, you're going to have a great time. We're going to have an awesome time this semester because I like all that stuff too, and I like explaining it. So we're going to have a lot of fun if you are into that stuff. But I just want to be clear about what this course is and isn't, because if you're expecting front-end development and I start talking about /r/n, CRLFs, and their importance, and you're just going to have a bad time. So I want to save you now while I still have a chance to talk you out of it. But if you do like all that low-level stuff, by all means, stay here. We're going to have a great time this semester. Because I do assume that you want to learn about web applications. There are other electives. None of you have to be here. None of you have to register for this course. It's not a requirement for graduation. The only reason to register for this course is I want to be here. Yes, I know there's other reasons, and some of you are here for those reasons, but I'm going to lie to myself and say you're here because you want to learn about web applications. And for most of you, I do actually believe that you're here. These next two go hand in hand. You should be able to develop software with little guidance, be able to find, read, and understand technical documentation. You're in a 300-level CSE course. Like, you should be able to do these things. I'm going to assume that you don't need a lot of hand-holding when it comes to the programming. Lecture is going to focus on concepts mostly, and then I'm going to assume that you know how to take those concepts and turn them into working code with very little guidance. That said, in like office hours, we're still going to help you with programming stuff, from time to time. Depends on what the exact question is. If you're like, how do I write a function in Python? Maybe not so much. But when we get to the more advanced things, like how do I do bit manipulation in Python, we're going to help you out because that's probably something new that you haven't done before. But myself and the TAs, we might always rely on this one too and be like, look, you got to read some Python documentation and figure out how to get that done. And more so, the second bullet point out of the two that I just highlighted, the third overall, if you're going to call me out on that. The third bullet point here is more so related to the project. Because I say this like, oh, we're not going to help you out and stuff. It's up to you to implement things. But honestly, for the homework assignments, I do go through a lot of the details and give a lot of examples in lecture and really do show you how to implement it. You obviously have a lot to do on the homework still beyond that, but I do get you started decently. And in recitations, which we're going to talk about in a second, they're going to help you get started on all that stuff. For the team project, this bullet point is much more prevalent. I'm not going to help you at all on the project. I have 0 lecture time, 0 minutes of lecture time helping you with the project. It covers the same concepts that we covered in the course. I might as well just come around and say it because it's part of the later sections, but I'll say it now. The homework, you're not allowed to use frameworks. You're going to build everything from the ground up, from scratch. I'm going to show you how to do that. And then for the team project, you're required to use frameworks. So there, you're going to have to find the documentation for whatever framework you choose to use, your team chooses to use, and figure out how to use that specific framework. So I don't have a lecture where I'm going to be like, hey, here's how this framework does routing, here's how this framework does HTML templates. I'm not going to do that in lecture. That's where you're going to have to find the documentation and figure out how it works. And you do get to do that as a team, so you can all help each other out. But for homework, I do go through quite a bit of how to do it for the homework assignments. And spend a minimum of 12 hours per week on CSE 312. I don't think I have to talk about that. I have a whole speech about this in 116 still. By the time you make it to 312, you know what a CSE course is all about. Like, you know it's going to be work. Recitations. So despite what you heard, we will have recitations this semester. This is the first semester where we're having them. I used to cancel them, and they were replaced with your team project technically, so I didn't get in trouble. But this semester we will have recitations. The reason for this is something that I said would come up a few times this lecture, is there are 2 sections of CSE 312 this semester. There always used to be one. We'd have 120 students, and it was manageable. It's kind of large for a class like this, but definitely manageable. Large because there's a lot of manual grading. It makes things tough. Now with 2 sections, double the students, 240 students, things get a bit tougher. And one of my big concerns with 240, with double the students, is double the queues in office hour. So I want to make sure I give you a scheduled time that's literally on your schedule where you can meet with a TA in a smallish group and get some more direct help on the assignments without having to go to office hours, wait in a queue for an hour and a half. You finally get to the front of the queue and the TA says, sorry, I got to go, I got class. And then you don't even get any help and you just wasted your time. I don't like those situations. I know it kind of has to happen by necessity. Sometimes we just can't, we only have so many TAs and so many hours in the day. But I like to avoid that if at all possible. So we have recitations available to you, so you can get that extra help from the TA. And this is mostly going to be, this can flux throughout the semester. And the recitation TAs, I told them, be flexible to your students in your recitation. If they want a particular thing, help them with that thing, of course. But in general, our plan is to have more demos and live coding examples to help you get started or finish, depending on where you're at, on your homework assignments. The lecture will focus on concepts, mostly. I'll do demos when I can fit them in, but I can only fit in so many demos. And then recitation will be mostly demos that will reinforce the content of the previous week. So that's the plan with recitations, which do start next week. The TAs... I'm asking the TAs to take attendance. Hopefully they'll take attendance in every recitation section. This attendance will not directly affect your grade. I'll be careful with my wording here. I'll probably still mess it up. It won't directly affect your grade, but they will take attendance, mostly so I know who's putting in the effort. Who's putting in the effort to show up to the recitation? Is this somebody who shows up to recitation, comes to office hours, is posted on Piazza, and clearly trying their hardest to pass this class and is just struggling with the material? That student is a lot different than somebody who doesn't show up to recitation, doesn't show up to lecture, doesn't submit the lecture question. Oh, I haven't even talked about that yet, but doesn't show up to lecture, rolls out of bed the morning of a deadline, and then emails me and says, oh, I need an extension. Those are 2 very different students. And I reserve the right, that's the wording I want to use, I'll reserve the right to take recitation attendance into account when I'm making decisions about each of those students in those situations. So if you don't show up to recitation, nothing will get harder than what's stated in the syllabus. If you're not showing up to recitation, you're still beholden to the letter of the law in the syllabus. But when I have those decisions where I could possibly give you some leniency, and I see that you haven't showed up to a single recitation, you're not getting that leniency. I'm going to say no. It's not going to happen. But if I see you've been coming to recitation, I know you from office hours, and the TAs say you're regular in office hours and stuff, you're clearly trying and just struggling, I'm going to be intentionally vague on what I mean by leniency, because it's going to be a case-by-case situation for every single student. But if you show up to recitations, that's going to weigh in your favor that I could potentially give leniency that makes the syllabus softer. That's not how I want to word that one. But I might give leniency where you won't be beholden to the letter of the law of the syllabus, where I could possibly bend something in your favor if that recitation attendance is there. But if you're not taking advantage of the resources that are afforded to you, I'm just going to fall back on the letter of the law, and you're beholden to that. If you technically fail, you are going to fail if you're not showing up to the recitations. So what that means, just to summarize, if you just know your stuff and you're crushing the homeworks, I don't care if you don't show up to recitation. You're not going to offend me at all. But if you're passing on this resource and also struggling in the course, you're not going to get much sympathy from me if you're not taking advantage of the resources that are offered to you. All right. I don't want to talk about that anymore. Any questions about this so far before we get into how you're graded? Okay. So the grading in the course, it's if you took 116 with me, then the grading is going to look similar. We're going to do a similar thing, LOs and AOs, learning objectives and application objectives. So let me introduce this for anyone who didn't take 116 with me, because this grading structure is quite a bit different than most courses. It's not just like a percentage-based grading like pretty much every other course is. So it's a little different, and I need to take some time to explain it. It's probably what we'll talk about for the rest of today. So there are 12 learning objectives of the course, which are all programming assignments. There are 5 total homeworks. The first 4 of them each have 3 learning objectives. So we have 12 learning objectives total, all programming objectives. Each homework is going to say, here's learning objective 1, here's learning objective 2, learning objective 3, and they're all graded on a pass-fail basis. You either completed that learning objective or you haven't. The learning objectives, name very intentional, that these are the learning objectives of the course. Anybody making it through CSE 312 should be able to complete all of the learning objectives, all of these 12 learning objectives, and they're all designed to be the core fundamental material of the course, as opposed to application objectives that we'll talk about later, which are kind of additional. These are the core learning objectives of the course. You need to be able to complete all 12 of these learning objectives, and yes, I do mean that literally. If you complete all of them, you're going to pass this class. If you complete 11 or less of them, you will fail CSE 312 this semester. So you do have to complete all of these, and these are designed to be, like I said, the core fundamental parts of the course. So anything that's really crucial to the course, something anybody passing CSE 312 at the end of the semester should be able to do, it's one of these learning objectives. So if you can't do all 12 of them, hey man, you didn't get what you were supposed to get. You didn't get your educational value out of this course, and it's unfortunately going to be an F. So the learning objectives, 12 learning objectives, got to pass them all, every single one of them. So this is harsh on the surface. I know it's harsh on the surface, so this paragraph outlines a little bit of leniency that's built into the system. I'm overusing that word leniency since I just used it in the previous one. This is leniency that everybody gets. It's part of the letter of the law, to go back to that wording. Everybody gets these 2 deadlines. There are 2 separate deadlines for each of the first 4 homeworks. Each of the first 4 homeworks, any homework with learning objectives. Homework 5 is different. It only has application objectives, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the first 4 homeworks have learning objectives, and they're the only homeworks that have learning objectives. So anything with learning objectives has 2 deadlines. There's a lot of manual grading in this course, something that'll be that's important when laying all this out. The first deadline is going to be 1 week after the content for that homework ends. So you get all of the content for the homework and then a full week to work on it. And the deadline's Monday morning, so you get a full week and plus an extra weekend, so you get like 9 full days after the content stops, after I've covered everything in lecture. It gives you 1 full week of office hours. You get a recitation in there. You get a lot of stuff after the content stops, a lot of time after the content stops. And that's what I call the expected deadline. That's when I expect any reasonable student to be completely done with that homework assignment a week after the content stops. I think that's reasonable. That's where you really should be done with all of that programming, especially since each homework, it's 2 weeks of content. So you really should be starting that first week of content. That's 3 weeks to complete that homework assignment. I think that's more than fair. I think that deadline could be even earlier, but when I put it the following Monday after a full week, I don't think there's much controversy. Like, that's plenty of time. And then this is where manual grading comes in. There's a round of grading. So I give my TAs 1 week turnaround on grading. So by the following Monday morning, you will get your grades back. You'll know if you completed all of the learning objectives or not. If you did not complete all the learning objectives, you fail the class, right? You just said all 12. No. So you get one more chance to complete your learning objectives. So you'll get your feedback, you'll get your grade, you'll see which learning objectives you passed and failed, and any one that you failed, you'll get some feedback about what went wrong when the TA was grading it, what happened there to not be able to earn credit for that. And then 1 week after that, so 2 weeks after the expected deadline, will be the final deadline where you can resubmit your learning objectives and get a second chance to pass each of the learning objectives. And then if you don't complete all 3 of them by that deadline, you failed the class, then you actually are done. But you do get a round of grading, a round of feedback from the TAs, and then a chance, a full week to revise your submission and then resubmit a week after grades are released from the expected deadline to be able to finish those 3 learning objectives for that assignment. So that's the timeline for each program assignment. So for 2 weeks, I cover the content, then a week of you coding, then a week of grading, get your feedback. If your feedback says you got all 3 learning objectives, then you're done. If the feedback says you didn't complete all 3 learning objectives, another week of coding, another submission, another week of grading before you know your fate, whether you are continuing with the course or not. Any questions on that? I know this one sounds very harsh on the surface. Historically speaking, I mean, I changed the structure of it a little bit. I tweaked the structure a little each semester. But historically speaking, very few students actually fail because of this. As in, very few students fail CSE 312, like percentage-wise. Of course, my reference point is 116, where a lot of students fail, so you might want to take that with a grain of salt. And most of the students who fail are the students who just didn't put in the effort, just didn't really try too hard. Fairly rare that a student's going to put in their 12 hours a week and fail 312. So I know it sounds harsh on the surface. Hopefully once you get into the thick of things, you'll realize that it's not too bad. Yeah. It would be 1 week after. So, yeah, after the 1 week after the deadline, you'll do your grading. So, yeah, let me be more specific on the timeline. So my goal, I said this in the other lecture, so I don't have to preface this. I already dug myself a hole. But my intent is that learning objective 1 on every single homework assignment will be auto-graded. I don't want more than that auto-graded, but I think I want 1 objective auto-graded. So you'll get your feedback, just like any other course without a lab, you'll get your feedback and score as you're submitting, and you can submit as many times as you want. And then LO2 and LO3 and the 2 AOs will be manually graded by the TAs. We're not going to start manual grading until after the deadline. There are a few reasons for this, but the most important one is if you submit a week early and you think, well, I would like this to be graded and get my grade, but somebody who submits a week early and then like 5 or 6 days later, right before the deadline, says, oh, crap, I think I made a mistake on that, resubmits with updated code. And if we already graded their old code, that's the grade that's going to stick, and now their newest submission, even though it's before the deadline, isn't going to count. Now, do we regrade this? What if the student got their feedback and then resubmitted before? It creates a lot of complications like that. So we're not going to start grading until we know we have everybody's final submission at that deadline. Then the TAs, I give the TAs 1 week to grade. That's my deadline for them. So they have to get your scores out by the following Monday, 9 a.m. And they'll post your grades to AutoLab. Are there going to be recovery opportunities like 116? No. When are Prof. Jesse's office hours? I don't have them finalized yet, but I think they're going to be Tuesday at noon or Tuesday at 11. I just have a few other meetings that I have to schedule, and I don't know where those ones are going to go. But I'll add them to the Piazza post to the schedule as soon as I know. The recovery opportunities, we actually got rid of those in 116 as well. They didn't serve the purpose they were meant to serve. There are too many students just relying on them, using up all of them, and then asking for more. But anyone who used more than one of them usually just failed anyway. People either used 0 or 100. They weren't serving their purpose. Or needed 100. They can't use 100, but yeah. Sorry, what was that? Yes. Oh, yeah, I had to get into that. So the incentive I already covered was you get a round of feedback. If you're just aiming for the final deadline, you don't get a round of feedback, and then there might be some mistake. Usually a security issue is what gets students. They forget to escape their HTML. They're open to some vulnerability. They submit for the final deadline, and that's just an F in the course, when they could have got a round of feedback and made it a simple fix to fix that. So the round of feedback and then application objectives is the next thing we're going to talk about, which does give you incentive. I will say, I'm tempted to not say this, but so there's no recovery opportunities. Those in 116 where you would get a third deadline, you would get a deadline extension, that doesn't exist in the course in the letter of the law. If you're going to recitations, that's one of the tools in my toolbox that I could potentially offer. But there's no guarantees that those exist. I will weigh in a lot of information when making those decisions. One of those factors is going to be recitation attendance. If you're not showing up to recitation, no, not at all. But if you are showing up to recitation, I'll factor in some other things and make a decision on a case-by-case basis. Because my worst case scenario is somebody gets the first 9 learning objectives, and then on homework 4, they get 2 out of the 3, and there's just one little thing, they're so close to passing, and they took advantage of every expected deadline, every round of feedback, every recitation. They're coming to office hours. I want to give that student another chance. Like, that's an extreme situation. Like, that's an easy yes, I want to give another chance to. And then, it's just a continuum of case-by-case decisions from there to somebody who hasn't tried it all. All right, so application objectives is where you're actually earning your A. If you get all 12 learning objectives, you pass the class. Even if you don't get a single application objective all semester, you're still walking away with a D and passing the class. If you want to improve your grade after you complete all 12 learning objectives, you want to work your way towards an A. Application objectives, that's what you're looking at. So let's talk about application objectives, and I think I can just blast them all on screen right here. So here's all 24 possible application objectives. The first 10 come from the application objectives on each homework. Each of the 5 homeworks will have 2 additional objectives, so every homework in 1 through 4 have 5 total objectives, 3 learning objectives, 2 application objectives. And homework 5 is just 2 application objectives. So your homework 5 is kind of bonus content. I don't want to call it that, but it's more shifting towards the project at that point. It's more project content, and none of it's really core to what the course is. So I couldn't justify making any of those learning objectives. So 5 homework assignments, 2 application objectives each. You have to complete these by the expected deadline. We will not grade application objectives on the final deadline. Final deadline's just to give you a second chance to try to stay in the course, try to stay in a chance for passing. You're not going to get application objectives for that deadline. That doesn't make sense to me. So at the expected deadline, this is the only time you can get the application objectives. So I am, through the structure and vocally right now, strongly encouraging you to aim for every expected deadline so you can start racking up application objectives, because you have to do the learning objectives anyway. And the application objectives will usually be more advanced content where it takes your understanding of the learning objectives and, as the name implies, applies them to a more complex situation. And some application objectives will be completely new content, extra content that's not covered at all, concepts that aren't covered at all in the learning objectives. So there's kind of different flavors of application objectives, but at any rate, every application objective isn't, I would say, isn't core to your fundamental learning objectives of the course. Like somebody passing 312 without doing the application objectives, I'd be okay with that. And that's why I structure the course this way. So each one of those, it's pass-fail, just like the learning objectives, and you get one shot just on the expected deadline. Total of 10, 2 on each homework. Group project is in 3 parts. Each part has 3 application objectives. This will be more clear when we get into the project. Project doesn't really kick in until week 5, so we'll talk about that when the time comes. But each of the 3 parts has 3 application objectives. The one thing I want to point out is there's 2 different results for the assessment. One is the team's score, which is just straight up, okay, you have this project submission, how many application objectives are complete? That's it. 0, 1, 2, or 3. That's your team's score. And then your individual grade is what actually earns you application objectives. That can be different than your team score. So the score isn't part of your grade. The grade is part of your grade, is the distinction there. And this can be adjusted at my discretion. I'm going to make individual grade adjustments where necessary. So if you're on a team with one complete slacker and your team, and you did all the work, and, well, that's like a group of 2, but for the sake of example, and your team gets a score of 2. You completed 2 of the application objectives, and the 3rd application objective just didn't go your way. You didn't complete it in time or whatever. Well, I might, if I see evidence that that person really is a slacker, I might give them 0 AOs and give you 3 AOs. I might go in and make those changes. These are all at my discretion. I do ask for feedback from you after every meeting, so every single week you'll all submit a form and tell me, rate each one of your teammates and everything. I take those scores into consideration to find issues, but I don't one-to-one just take those scores and do them, because I always hated that as a student. Like, if I rate my teammate who did nothing poorly, they're going to know that they got a lower grade than me, and then they're going to be mad at me because they know what I filled out in the course eval, or on the peer eval. So I don't use those directly. Even if you give a perfect score, everybody on your team says everything was great, I still might make a grade adjustment. And even if your whole team tanked somebody and said they were the worst, if I don't see the evidence of it, then I might not make a grade adjustment. So I do make these at my discretion, so don't get mad at your teammates if you see individual grade adjustments. These are all my decision. Which, with the course doubling in size, this took a long time with 120 students. With 240, I'm signing up for a lot of work making these adjustments, but it's my job, I'll do it. There's a presentation at the end of the semester, 2 AOs available there, and lecture questions. These are simple questions that are designed to be easy if you show up to lecture and stay awake the whole lecture, kind of pay attention. They should be pretty easy as long as you're paying attention to lecture. I don't design them to be really tricky or difficult. So they're mostly were you here and awake. And most lectures will have these. Starting Friday is going to be our first lecture question. We're going to drop 9 of them, which is a high number. I got this number from Paul. I thought it was too high, but he talked me into it for 116, and then I copied the number over to 312. We're going to drop 9 of these. These are no questions asked, just dropping 9. Whether you didn't submit the question, you didn't make it to lecture, whatever, maybe you were sick for 3 whole weeks, which I hope not. I hope you don't have to go through that. Or if you showed up, submitted the question, but got the wrong answer, both of those can count as a drop. So we're going to drop 9 lecture questions. After 9 drops, if you got every remaining lecture question right, so if you missed up to 9 lecture questions, 3 AOs. If after 9 drops, you missed between 1 and 5, 2 AOs. If after 9 drops, you missed between 6 and 10, 1 AO. And if after 9 drops, you missed 10 or more, so 19 or more lecture questions missed, I'm not giving you anything for that. Come on, man. That's a lot of misses. 19. You're not getting anything. No reward for that. But you can miss 18. I'll give you an AO. So that's so many. These, when I was typing, I thought it was ridiculous. Saying it out loud, I think it's ridiculous. But I do want to encourage you to attend lecture and pay attention. Keep up with the material. So even if you had to miss a ton of lectures, or I shouldn't say had to, even if you skipped like the first half of the semester, I'd have to do the math on that, but even if you missed a lot of lecture and just woke up in March, I still want you to have some incentive to get that 1 AO at least. Whew. All right. Oh, we didn't even talk about homework yet. We got 4 minutes. We got this. How many members can a team have? 4 to 5. How common are cases where students don't land it the first time and have to redo the learning objective? It's fairly common. It's pretty common. There are a lot of little things, especially with the manual grading. You don't get your constant feedback like you do in other programming courses. So with manual grading, it's easy to miss something. If you're testing your code thoroughly, then not often at all. But students get sloppy. They submit 1 minute before the deadline and just didn't do their final checks. So it happens. Maybe I probably will have to have an opt-out form. All right, let's talk about the rest of this quick. So homework is in Python. I'll have some starter code. It's going to be in Python, and you have to comply with that starter code, especially because I want LO1 of each homework to be auto-graded. You're going to have to conform to some protocol, so I'll have the starter code that conforms to that, and then don't violate that. So it does have to be in Python, required. For homeworks, no external libraries or frameworks are allowed. The general rule of thumb for this is if I covered it in detail in lecture, you have to code it in detail on your homework. If I didn't cover it in detail on the lecture, you don't have to implement it in detail on your homework. For example, I'm not going to talk about JSON syntax, but you will use JSON in some of your homeworks. So you can import JSON in Python and have that library do your JSON for you, but I am going to cover in excruciating detail HTTP, so you can't import HTTP and have that module do everything for you, because that's just doing the course for you. So you are building a web framework from scratch. You're building your web app from just a TCP socket, working at the byte level to implement these protocols and build a web framework, a web application, which isn't. Y'all are getting anxious on me. The last class, too. What's up with day one? Everybody wants to leave right away. So no frameworks, and that distracts me. It slows me down. We can get out of here if you just shut up. So no frameworks. You have to code from scratch on your homework. This isn't realistic to the way you're going to be doing things in industry out there in the real world or your side projects or anything. This is strictly an educational thing. You have to work from scratch for your homeworks and understand how these protocols work. For your project, it's the exact opposite. You are required to use frameworks to get that more practical experience of how you're going to do things in the real world. So there's two very different assessments. The individual homeworks, I want you to get that low-level, deep understanding of how web stuff works. And for the project, I want you to get used to some of the tools that you're going to be using out there in the real world. And don't cheat. You've heard the don't cheat speech many times. I can skip that one. All right, and I'll see y'all Friday.